They say when you grow old in the mountains, silence becomes your closest companion. But sometimes, that silence listens back. And sometimes, it licks your hand. The cabin sat crouched against the side of the mountain like it had secrets to keep. It was weather-beaten and worn, sagging slightly under the weight of age and memory. It belonged to my great-grandmother, a woman made of dust, cedar, and stubbornness. She had lived there most of her life, long after her husband passed away, long after the last road had turned into dirt and the last neighbor had moved out. She didn't mind the isolation. In fact, she preferred it. Said it made her feel closer to her roots. Said it kept the noise of the world out and the quiet of her thoughts in. She had one companion in that old cabin, a shaggy black mutt with kind eyes and a slow, deliberate way of moving. His name changed depending on the week. Sometimes Jasper, sometimes Boy, sometimes just that damn dog. But one thing stayed the same. Every night before bed, he would curl up beside her and lick her hand once before settling in. She said it comforted her, reminded her that someone was still watching over her, the warmth of a tongue, the weight of a protector. It became a ritual. The dog would lick her hand, and she'd drift off into a dreamless sleep with the sound of wind whispering through the trees. That's what made the night it happened stand out so much. It started like any other. A cold wind brushed against the windows. The cabin creaked like it always did, wood stretching its bones. She had just finished her nightly tea, turned the radio off, and shuffled to bed. The dog followed her, his claws clicking softly on the wooden floor. She tucked herself under the quilt she'd sewn decades ago, felt the bed sag slightly as the dog laid beside it. And then, warmth. A single, familiar lick to the back of her hand. Comfort, reassurance. Sleep came easy, but the stillness didn't last long. Somewhere in the deep dark of the night, something pulled her from her sleep. A sound. A wet, soft whimper. The kind of noise a dog makes when it's dreaming or frightened. She stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, pupils wide in the darkness. The cabin was pitch black, only a sliver of moonlight peeking through the curtains. She reached her hand out again, the way she always did, and sure enough, a tongue greeted her. A slow, familiar lick, but the whimpering continued. She frowned, but exhaustion pulled at her. Maybe the old dog was having a nightmare. She mumbled something soothing and drifted back to sleep. It happened again an hour later. The same sound. That same low, whimpering whine. She stirred again, hand out. Another lick. Warm, solid, present, and then quiet again. She frowned a little more this time. The dog was usually quiet through the night. But maybe he was hurting. He was getting older. The third time it was closer to morning. The darkness had begun to lift slightly, enough to paint the cabin in pale shadows. The whimpering returned. Louder this time. Urgent. She sighed, whispered his name softly, reached out. Another lick, comforting. That seemed to quiet the dog again. She stayed awake a while longer this time, listening to the wind and the trees and the rhythmic drip of something faint in the distance. Then, eventually, sleep returned. When the morning finally broke, it did so gently. Light pushed through the windows, brushing against the floorboards and illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. The old woman stirred slowly, muscles aching like they always did. She reached her hand out once more. Nothing. No tongue. No warm breath. Just the absence of something that had always been there. She blinked. sat up. Maybe he was in the other room, curled by the wood stove, or out on the porch, nosing through snow. She stood, wrapped her shawl around her shoulders, and moved slowly across the creaking floorboards. Her joints complained. Her breath puffed out in little clouds. Then she heard it again. Drip, drip, drip. It was slow, deliberate. Not the kitchen sink, she knew that sound. Not the pipes, this was different. It came from the hallway. She followed it, footfalls slow and uncertain, past the kitchen, past the coat rack, past the old clock that hadn't worked in years. Each step closer, the sound grew louder. Drip, drip, drip. She stopped outside the bathroom door. The sound was definitely coming from inside. Her hand reached for the knob, trembling. She turned it. The door creaked open slowly. At first, all she saw was the mirror, fogged slightly from the morning cold. Then her eyes dropped to the tub. Her hand flew to her mouth. A sound escaped her throat, sharp and thin and ancient. There, slumped over the bathtub, hanging from the light fixture by a leash, was the dog. His body dangled, still. His paws were limp, claws just barely brushing the edge of the porcelain. His fur matted dark and red, blood running down his chest in thin rivers, and from his neck, drop by drop, blood dripped into the bathtub. Drip, drip, drip. She backed away, knees threatening to give. Her body shook. Tears welled and broke. She wiped her face with the back of her trembling hand. That's when she saw the mirror again. Not fogged anymore. Number It was painted. Painted in something dark and viscous. Letters scrawled with shaking hands and manic strokes. Words written in blood. Words that glistened. Words that didn't belong in her world. Humans can lick too. She screamed. The kind of scream that shatters a person's throat on the way out. That tears something loose inside you. She stumbled back. Nearly fell. The room spun. The world spun. She clutched the doorframe and turned from the horror. Behind her, the mirror loomed. A red reflection. A message meant just for her. She locked every door, every window, sat on the floor with the quilt wrapped around her like armor, the rifle across her lap. But nothing came. Not that day, not that night, not ever again. Something had been in the cabin with her that night. Something that knew how to comfort, how to pretend, how to mimic. Something that wanted to get close. Something that licked.